All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is a Thursday, and I'm really pretty darn excited to welcome Ed Kelly. He is I guess, I don't know how to describe you, Ed, but we connected yesterday, a little bit of tension, maybe a lot of tension, and you offered to come on the program to discuss your thoughts on Charlie Kirk, my thoughts on Charlie Kirk. I really appreciate it. Thanks, and welcome to Halitics.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, I'm not a political pundit. I'm just a businessman. I live over on the West Coast and looking to have a fruitful conversation with you today.
Yeah, again, really appreciate it. And as I mentioned before, we'll have Ed on until about 12:30 East Coast time. No later than that. I promise I'll get him off by then. But as I also mentioned to Ed, I do start my program with a discussion of the latest death count in Gaza, the tragedy there, the result of American empire and Israel, sinister interlocking. And we do see from WAFA, the Palestinian news agency now, death toll of 64,718 official. It's just continues. The killing fields there is as awful as it can be. 72 killed over the past 24 hours, according to the health ministry. And we have, of course, our little slide that we put up, and then we're going to get it right to Ed on this 24th anniversary, by the way, of 9/11. But my slide here, my count, I have 64,718. We just heard that as well from WAFA. That is 63 more than we had identified as of yesterday. Slight difference from what WAFA is reporting because they included some casualties from yesterday in their count of today. And Trump and Netanyahu, now we have 12,160 Gazans killed since Trump took office, including likely over 6,000 women and children. And of course, those are official numbers. They're always being revised upward when bodies are found. Ed, I told you I was going to talk about Gaza to open the program. That's what I do. Before we get to our conversation about Charlie Kirk, I just have two questions. One, do you have any comment you want to make about that story? I always let my guests speak, always on every topic that they're on for. So any comment about Gaza?
I guess, why do you have such strong support for the Palestinian people and Gaza? What's your main drive? Why do you have an overwhelming support there? I mean, you live in the United States. Do you have family connected there? What's your connection?
I have great sympathy for victims. I've always taken the position that we have to do everything we can to make sure everyone has enough and no one has too much. And at this point, the people in Gaza, the Palestinians there, have nothing. They don't even have their lives anymore, except if they're barely hanging on by a thread. Also, as a Jewish person, I've always been, it's always been in my mind that the inhumanity that people are capable of, although I didn't, as far as I know, no close relatives were victims of the Holocaust in the 20th century. The horror of that crime lives with me. And the worst thing that I can think of is being part of a group, part of a country that commits such an atrocity. So seeing it happen in the name of Israel, which, I am Jewish, as I mentioned, although purely culturally at this point, and also my country, right? I'm an American, and we've been supporting Israel full-throated. I feel like I have an absolute moral obligation to do what little I can do to try to stop it, to try to activate people against this.
Have there been previous kind of wars that have gone on that the United States has been involved in where you've done this, something similar? Because I'm not fully inundated on your background. Is this something you do for each war and count the victims?
Well, that's a fair question. When I was doing the program in Monterey, because I've only been doing this live stream for about 4 years, so there really hasn't been anything comparable to this that the United States has been complicit in. People talk about Congo, they talk about Sudan. Obviously, those are terrible crimes too, but I don't think the United States is responsible nearly to the same degree. And also, there aren't Jewish people who are behind it. So for those two reasons, this is closer to me. When I was doing the radio program in Monterey, I did spend a lot of time. I first started it in 2005, and there was a lot of focus I can't say did a death count. There was a lot of focus on the Cheney-Bush torture at Abu Ghraib, and then later on when Obama was president on the destruction of Libya by
The
Obama
airstrikes. Yeah.
and Hillary. And I did talk often about the Iraq and how it was, just basically destroyed as well under false pretenses. So I would say that, yes, I've been consistent to answer your question as fairly as I can.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so before we get to Charlie Kirk, one other point I just wanted to raise. This is the 24th anniversary today, September 11th, of the 9/11 attack on America. And I've talked about this on my program before, my experiences, but do you have any memories? Ed, you're a lot younger than I am, but I'm sure you do remember September 11, 24 years ago. Any thoughts that are with you, including one thing that struck me is that 24 years ago was a day of violence against the United States. And obviously we had some pretty violent actions yesterday, foremost among them for our purposes, the assassination, I think is a fair term to use, of Charlie Kirk, but also the school shooting as well in Colorado.
Yeah. 24 years ago, I was in high school. The scenes of what I saw are what, millions and millions of other people saw, which was two planes flying into the Twin Towers, destruction, death, mayhem, firefighters risking their lives, dying, people coming out of buildings, falling. I mean, just tragedy. And it also, sparks a conversation on why it happened, right? What that investigation really, what information, the United States was able to pull. It resulted in war, right? That's all, I can really say about 9/11. Just tragic. A lot of people, especially the firefighters, risked their lives, and they died.
Yeah, I've mentioned just on the air before that I was at work there. I actually heard the plane or something similar that hit the Pentagon. I was working in Washington D.C. at the time, and I was at my desk when that plane hit the Pentagon, and there was definitely a loud crash or sound. I'm not sure if that was it. I think it was. And then maybe within 15 or 20 minutes, we were advised that the day was over for us, and we were to go home as quickly as possible and as safely if we could possibly do so. All right, again, I just want to reintroduce you. Ed Kelly, Ari in the chat asking me to reintroduce you. So Ed Kelly is a commentator, did not like something I posted yesterday, certainly reacted to it, and very generously offered to come on the air and discuss his thoughts on what I had written and his thoughts on Charlie Kirk. And so I really appreciate that, because that's what I think we should be doing here. I want to have a conversation. I want to address the problems that we face and try to solve them. And that sounds like exactly what you're looking to do as well. So
absolutely.
You mentioned this before we went on air, so I'll just put it on screen. There is an update, right, from the New York Times. Here's this. This was, it says updated 5 minutes ago, as of 9:31 Pacific, I guess Mountain Time. So this is maybe about an hour and a half now since this was posted. They did find the rifle that allegedly, I don't know how they know this, I guess they ran tests, or they could just tell from the bullet that this was the rifle that was used. Did you have any other, reaction to this story, or want to use it to riff on what happened yesterday, Ed?
Well, there's some details within, maybe not this New York Times article, but from the DOJ directly. The gun was found, right, in the same path of the shooter. And there was some ideologies written on the magazines and the gun itself. So just, to me, I'll go ahead and let the information kind of pan out. But from here, it looks like, transgender individual committed a coordinated attack. That's what it looks like right now. That's the information I'm speaking on. So I'm sure the justice will do their job and take a look at it more thoroughly. But that's what it looks like right now. And that's, that sparks a different issue. If it is a transgender individual, I think it just adds to the further statistics. And right before Charlie Kirk was politically assassinated yesterday, the conversation was around transgenderism. If you look at the videos. So to me, it looks like there was patsies in the crowd. And I think that the timing is odd, that he would be shot and killed after a question around having a public debate, on a college campus around transgenderism and what his thoughts were. And then his life was taken. So it's the opposite of debate. It's the opposite of democracy. It's the opposite of what the United States prides itself on and has, for hundreds of years. And, it's just violent.
So my understanding is a question was asked, do you know how many was asked of Charlie Kirk before he was shot? Do you know how many and killed? Do you know how many transgender mass killers there have been or mass shootings have been perpetrated by transgender people over the past, 20 years or what have you? And apparently he said too many. And the number that I heard was somewhere around 6 out of 1,500. So a very low percentage. I don't know what percentage of transgender people are involved in mass shooting, but regardless, what's your takeaway? Let's assume for the purpose of this conversation that the shooter was motivated by trans ideology, was motivated by anger or hatred of Charlie Kirk because he has expressed animus, shall we say, towards the trans community, or at least towards trans ideology. By the way, I have been critical as well. I don't know if you've seen any of my programs, but on occasion I have made the point that I do not believe that transgender girls and women should be competing in sports against biological women and girls. So I don't fully subscribe to the most extreme trans ideology either. But I ask you, where does that lead you? What's your takeaway from that fact, if it is the case?
Yeah, well, you have to look at, you can expand the data any way you want, right? The right does it, the left does it. So if you expand the data over, just like global warming or, climate change, if you expand the data and you look at things, you can derive different information. So if you look at the last 90 days, if you look at the last 24 months, you will see a hockey stick on a scale of people of transgender ideologies committing mass shootings, right? When I say mass, it's 4, right? Gang shootings or mass shootings. But if you look at the data from a 24-month period, you will see a line that doesn't look good on a graph. Now, if you expand it out over 15 years, we haven't had a transgender conversation in this country. Back in the early 2000s, it was not even a conversation. Why are we having? So your question, it makes me think, why are we having this conversation around transgenderism more, right? There's data behind it, right? There's a lot of information you can find out why we're having this conversation more and more. And now, as of the last 2 years, we're seeing transgender kids, hopped up on SSRIs. They don't know who they are, and they're shooting people in the neck, right? Because they don't like something that was said. But that's what's going on right now. So it's just unnerving. And so, it brings me to your comment on Facebook where, you said Charlie Kirk is a monster. I know that those were some choice words on your part, and you took it down. But I think it's that kind of conversation that leads an unstable individual to think they're right for committing murder, right? I think it's the problem. You have a lot of kids, Gen Zs, and the younger crowd who they've grown up in weird times, right? And so when they go on the internet and they see a Hal Ginsberg, or they see whoever they're following call people Nazis, fascists, the world's ending, is a monster, look at all of this stuff. And they go, oh, okay, well, let me call my friend John. He's got a 30-06 bolt action, and let's coordinate and kill this guy, right? That's the kind of unstable youth that is out there these days. So I think it's super important to watch tone. And I'm not saying don't speak, but just watch what you post, right? Because there's a lot of unstable kids out there right now. And
well, I think you make a good point. I'm just going to jump in real quick. That's part of the reason I pulled the words that I used, not honestly because I was concerned that I was going to trigger some, impressionable young person to commit a crime. That really wasn't my concern. To be honest with you, my bigger concern, because I feel like I can defend the use of that term, but that I used, and I pulled it because I thought it was very provocative and unnecessarily so. It did not fully capture Kirk. I have a lot of issues with a lot of what Kirk's done, and I think he's on balance been problematic at best. But there were, in the end, my goal has always been to try to unite folks. And I'll tell you honestly, Ed, why I was so angry in that moment. Because it felt very personal to me. I don't know Charlie Kirk. I don't know anything about him. I have really spent a lot of my life, and you made the point, fairly, it's true. I have a very small audience. I don't have a following. Charlie Kirk had an enormous audience, an enormous following. My goal has been, I had some success in radio. It wasn't like I was a complete bust. I mean, I'm going to pat myself on the back. You can see I got my best of stars behind me. So it wasn't like I didn't have a following, but no, nothing like a Charlie Kirk who's made a very successful living out of it. Whereas for me, this is a drain.
Somewhere, right?
So I'm giving you, my whole backstory, basically. Why it felt personal? Because what I've tried to do really from day one is to build what I would say is a movement that unites poor, struggling, and working people together against, call them the elites, the billionaire class. I use the terms militarist, corporatist, any of those terms you want. That's what I've tried to do. And with varying but relatively little success. I compare that to Kirk. I look at his record and I see a guy who has used, obviously, his gifts at uniting, at let's say this, exciting people. Getting people to believe in him, to follow him, used his gifts to, I believe, divide people who have similar economic interests, to divide people who are being exploited by the elites, by the billionaire class. And he's dividing them and pitting them against each other in service of those very elites. And when I read all the encomiums to him, I find that very frustrating.
Can you expand on dividing? I mean, what is he doing? Is he?
Well, I mean, I'll give you an example. He used the term, just one little thing, Mohammedans, to describe Muslims, which, as I understand, Muslims find very offensive. And I would say that what the U.S. government and Israel are doing to the Palestinian people, the majority of whom, the great majority, are Muslim, is in a way, although far worse, but in a way comparable to what we do to working people in this country in many ways. Exploit, take advantage of, provide them with little or no self-determination, little or no control of their lives. You can always point to a few people who make it successfully, but on balance, life for people in this country who are not affluent, or at least start out middle class, generally is pretty damn bad. And I would love to see, I want to see people who unite us. And he, as I see it, and from my reading, has done just the opposite throughout his career, blaming poor people for their problems. He said over and over, if people would just get married, if they would just work hard, everything would be fine. I don't agree with that message. I don't think it's helpful. I think it's true for a few people, but it ignores the fact that most people end up in pretty much the same place that they were born economically, with always some exceptions in either direction. And I certainly don't put myself, I look at myself and I'm really lucky. I was fortunate. I grew up in a privileged household and I'm still privileged. And I'm able to do what I want. And I don't have to do a job that I hate. I did for a long time. I wasn't happy with it and I don't do it. And I want everyone to have a decent life. I want everyone to be able to sleep in a bed every single night. I don't care if maybe they're lazy. Maybe it's their fault. Maybe they're a gamaholic. Doesn't matter to me. In the end, we're all human beings. We all deserve a minimum quality of life. That's my opinion. That's kind of the opposite, as I understand it, of Charlie Kirk's opinion.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thanks for the summary. I think you could draw a parallel between your opinion and Charlie's opinion, right? You guys have a difference of opinion, right? I don't think it's divisive to have a different opinion. And I think that's where people misconstrue, public figures like Charlie Kirk and yourself. You have your own opinion. Your opinion may be rooted in factual information or objective bias. But Charlie Kirk is a Christian, right? I think him using some choice words when he talks about Muslims isn't divisive. I think it's rooted in maybe a little bit of anger that Christians are still slayed by the thousands overseas. I mean, it still happens today. And I think it probably makes him angry. But I think as a public figure, he did a fantastic job at bringing large groups of college kids primarily. He even invited teachers to talk, but teachers never came and talked on his show, right? And I think he's trying to impart, part religion, part, he's endorsing the family unit. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So it's not divisive. So, it's opinion versus opinion. That's my thought there, Hal.
I think it's fine to embrace the family unit. I support that.
To call a guy evil, right, after he was slain, right, in front of thousands of his supporters is like, I just kind of want to know, why you think he's evil, right? Like, where does that come from?
Well, I think I explained it as best I can. I think we live right now. And I've already acknowledged to you that I don't think that it was a poor choice of words at best. But I don't know where else to go with this. I believe, I see, I think we would agree, right, that genocide is evil, correct? Would we agree on that? That when you have a group of people with power and they use that power to wipe another group of people off the face of the earth, we would agree that's evil.
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah, without a question.
We can disagree over whether what Israel's doing in Gaza is genocide. That we can have a disagreement about. I personally don't think the facts support any other conclusion. Now, I get that there are many who disagree with me. I'm telling you what I see. Sure. Charlie Kirk consistently defended what Israel was doing. I think that's evil.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I get where you're coming from. But I'll just
add, it was still what you said is correct. It was the wrong words, and that's why I took them down. Because I was bitter, I was angry at the moment, and I've seen this, and I'll give you some other counterexamples. If you remember, there was a congressman, and then I want to get your thoughts because I'm talking more, but I really want to respond to this. I've been very critical of so-called liberals or I don't want to call them progressive, but liberals too, when they've died and there's been all this outpouring of support. There's a lot of sentimentality that surrounds someone's death. When I was doing radio, I don't know if you remember, there was a guy, Tim Russert, and a lot of people really liked Tim Russert. He was a ABC guy, I think, and he died. And a lot of my audience then, they were liberals, really liked Tim Russert. And I was just not going to sit there and tell you how great Tim Russert was. And I was critical of him in his death, after his death. I didn't call him evil, but I was critical of him, very critical, and that got a lot of anger. I was also critical of a man that was very popular on the left among men, John Lewis. He was a congressman from Georgia, an African-American. He had led, he was a civil rights hero, and he was, and I honor that. But he also was in his later years a tool, in my view, of the pharmaceutical industry and of for-profit healthcare industry, took a lot of money from them and stymied the campaign, the movement for single-payer health care, which would have, in my view, greatly benefited his constituents, the people he claimed he supported. By the way, that was a movement that also Charlie Kirk was strongly against, Medicare for all. So, to me, those are really bad things. And I was very critical of John Lewis. After his death, I said, I don't think we should be fine, let's talk about him as a civil rights icon, but let's not talk about him as a hero in the House of Representatives, because what he did was bad for the poor, struggling, and working people in his district. So this is consistent. This is consistent with me.
That's good, right? I just think we're talking about difference of opinions. I think using choice words like evil, I mean, that's fine. That's your prerogative to use language like that. Well, I think it was untimely, and I think we're seeing it on the web more and more. I think people are celebrating death, and I think it's just the language needs to change. But in terms of Palestine, Gaza, other countries, I mean, I live in the U.S., right? We have a U.S. economy. We have a U.S. GDP, right? We have a lot of different cultures, right? We have, what you would call Balkanism here in the United States. And I mean, there's I don't know how many Palestinians there are in the U.S., right? Somewhere around 100,000, right? It's not large. So I think that getting U.S. on board, just the people here in the U.S. to get on board with, I just don't understand the movement, right? I understand that you think that the U.S. empire is engaging in conflict overseas. I'll disagree with you there. I'm not going to call you evil, right? That's your opinion. But if I did call you evil, I mean, you just have to think about what you say. I think we don't need any involvement in other countries, right? We have allies. It's been structured that way. We have a constitution that's been around for hundreds of years. And I think that's what makes the United States fantastic, right? I think we don't need to be involved in conflicts overseas anymore. It's just, we don't need to support it.
Well,
that's
we agree
my
on that. I also am against the Ukraine war and the support we offered Ukraine, the basically no strings attached support that the Biden administration offered Ukraine. I actually preferred Trump on that issue. Now I have a lot of criticism for the way Trump's handled it, but at least he spoke out against it. And I complimented him for what he said on a CNN town hall, where he said, I want people not to die. I thought that was exactly the right answer.
Right.
You can continue. Look, if you want to hold against me forever or for whatever,
no, I'm not.
That I use the term evil, I get it. I've already said I shouldn't have used the term. I'm not going to back. It's not going to change my opinion. I have my views on Charlie Kirk. I shouldn't have phrased it online the way I did. I've explained my reaction. I have to work on that. I know that's an issue I have to deal with. We only have a few more minutes, and I had some other questions. So, but can I ask you a question? Because I got this from Ari. He does want to know if you have a particular opinion about Arabs and Muslims.
You have different religions, right? You have Christianity, Catholicism, branches of Christianity. You have things like Sharia law, right? Like that just is not going to happen here in the United States. And I don't think that byproduct of that religion and how they practice their religion is something for the United States. I think that it's too extreme, right? That's my thoughts there.
But isn't it true that, to be fair, every religion has its extremists? I don't know that Islam or Muslims are more inclined. You have fundamentalist Christians who are very extreme. I'm Jewish. I have Orthodox, or my wife had Orthodox relatives in Israel. And the way they spoke about Palestinian people was just the ugliest rhetoric, totally dehumanizing them.
That's fine, but I don't think there's any comparisons you can draw from Sharia law. I think it's totally different way of life.
You have groups of Christians who live in these, very isolated communities that they embrace. Certainly in southern Utah, I don't want to go after any particular religion, but still some practice polygamy. So I think that's
but 99% of all Muslims. 99% of all Muslims, Sharia law, right?
That's just not. I don't accept that number. I don't. I reject that number. I don't believe that's
what
accurate.
is the number? What is the number? Let's have
I don't
a
know,
conversation.
but I'm not. But I'm sure it's not 99%. I know Muslims. I have friends who are Muslim, and they're not.
1%.
They don't observe Sharia law. Ed,
I'm talking about overseas, not here in the United States. Overseas Sharia law is practiced, correct, Hal?
Well, I'm sure there are some extremists, yes. And we push people to be more extreme too because of the way we conduct our foreign policy.
Okay. I mean, religion is always a tough one, right? And it sparks, a lot of emotions. But I just wanted to kind of, in summation, just say, Hal, if you had a show that was large and you went on college campuses and you talked about your opinions, right? And you were shot and you were killed in front of all of your followers, I think that I would never go online and say anything bad about you during that time. I just think that there's a big discrepancy between, human behavior. And I think that the left is somehow being fed something on the daily. Our phones are probably super different. My feeds on my phone are probably completely different from the feeds on your phone. I think people they're talking past each other. They're talking out of the side of their neck, right? And until we get conclusions with data, which we used to do in this country, we used to make policy around data, nothing's going to get done, right? We're going to have kids on SSRIs shooting up people they disagree with. And I think that we have to start small.
I agree with you. I think I agree. One of the biggest frustrations about me is that rather than what I've been trying to do, with obviously mixed success, if any, is bring people together. And obviously what I did yesterday online pushed people away whom I'm trying to bring into the fold. Or at least, let me say it a different way, not bring into the fold, have a conversation and maybe learn from. And you even taught me something today because you were talking about SSRIs and violent behavior. And I was not aware of any links between SSRIs, antidepressants, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, if that's what SSRI stands for. And apparently there is some credible studies to show, and I want to do more research because I just did that off my thumbnail. But yeah, it does appear that there is some legitimacy to the argument that SSRIs can cause people to become more violent. So that's really an interesting fact, and I want to look into that further. So I appreciate that. I think that's one of the values that come from having conversation. I think another value that comes from conversations when you say, hey, Hal, I think what you said was wrong. I think it was really bad. You shouldn't have said it. I think it was whatever terms you use. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Yeah. That also is helpful, I think, to all of us and brings us better understanding. Now, it is after 12:30, and you told me I had to go at 12:30. So
I appreciate the time
I don't
today,
want
Hal.
to keep you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got the kid up. He's waking up. So I appreciate the time today, Hal. I thought it was, good to get on a call to talk about your thoughts and kind of why you, said what you did. And I think we were able to have a fruitful conversation. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, I hope maybe you'll come on again at some point, Ed. I really appreciate your being here. All right, man, you take care. Good luck to your son. That's great that you're can I just ask you a quick question about you taking care of your son? Didn't Charlie Kirk tell Taylor Swift she was supposed to listen to her husband and do what he told her? I mean, I can't believe that's the way you see a marriage. Maybe it is, but to me, that's very problematic. I won't say it's evil, but it's problematic.
Hal, that's super loaded to say on my way out here, man. But we can talk about that. If you want to go ahead and put that as a discussion point, I'll go on and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. And that we'll save it for later. I appreciate that. I will not follow up. Thank you so much. It was great to have Ed Kelly with us. I'm going to let him go. So we'll talk to, hopefully he promises, says he'll come back. So we'll hold him to that. And Ed, again, thank you so much for being part of Halitics. I'm letting him go now. I don't want to belabor him on the program. All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. Some other thoughts on that is Ed is going to hopefully give me some advice on building the channel. That would be very, very helpful. I'm not going to continue discussing Charlie Kirk at this point unless you call me. I don't want to I don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for? Again, I feel like if I have a guest on to discuss a topic, I don't really want to continue the conversation in their absence. That said, if you call, obviously, I will be happy to discuss him or anyone else, anything else that you bring up. I do want to focus on a story, and this goes to Mamdani. By the way, Mamdani, it looks like, isn't going to have to face I can't believe Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo. What is the matter? The fear on the left has been, I think that's a fair term to use. The fear among us on the left has been that there will be a one-on-one, mano-a-mano between Zoran Mamdani and Andrew Cuomo, and Cuomo could win. And with Sliwa and Eric Adams in the race, then Andrew Cuomo's chances of prevailing are greatly reduced. Now, and it looks like at this point, and I want Mamdani to win. I don't want Andrew Cuomo to win. So from that standpoint, from that, results-oriented standpoint, I want Eric Adams and Curtis Sliwa to stay in the race. And I think Sliwa's absolutely going to say he's not going anywhere. He's clearly not going to leave. And it looks like neither is Adams. So from that standpoint, from a results-oriented standpoint, I'm glad. But from a purely procedural standpoint, it is a little less democratic, because it's quite possible that Mamdani could win with less than 50% of the vote. And it's even possible that he would not win if it was just he versus Cuomo. And that's what ranked choice voting is supposed to set up, right? So we had ranked choice voting in the Democratic primary, and a lot of folks said, well, the more conservative Cuomo would win in a ranked choice runoff because most New Yorkers, even if they're Democrats, aren't socialists, and they do support Israel. And obviously we saw that wasn't the case. We know for a fact, because of ranked choice voting, that Democrats wanted Zoran Mamdani to be their nominee. At least the Democrats who voted did. And that's a really important thing. That's great knowledge to have, because it means that Zoran can claim the mandate. Zoran can go to the city council. Zoran can go to the citizens of the city of New York and say, hey, you wanted me. Most of you wanted me. Most Democrats wanted me to be mayor. I'm not going against public opinion. You're with me. That's very, very important, very powerful. But he may not have that ability to say, with respect to the entire city, if it's not him versus Cuomo and the other two candidates are in the race. Now, again, I want to be mayor. The most important thing is winning. The most important thing is sitting in Gracie Mansion by a ton. I mean, it's so much more important than some kind of, participation trophy. But in the end, my belief is that the process is really important. And I would support a process where we learn whom most voters want to be mayor. And that would be ranked choice voting. So ranked choice voting could hurt, in the end, Zoran, because if all of Sliwa's voters and if all of Adams' voters put Cuomo second, which I think they would mostly do, then Cuomo could win. And you know what? If that were the case, he should be the mayor. But fortunately, I guess in this instance, that is not the case. I think it's very interesting the way, and by the way, again, 240-242-5646, would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646, just looking to see if anybody had called up, and they had not. So yeah, if you want to join me, please do. Again, so we have room. And yeah, and by the way, again, shout out to, I want to give another shout out to Ed because he was really upset at what I had written about Charlie Kirk. He really was, clearly. And, and he did what I think is the absolute correct response. I'm not saying he wasn't right. You react the way you react. My language was in the context, in the moment, was not what I'm proud of at all. And I'm sorry I used it, and I've made that clear, so I don't need to go further. But he reacted, and I appreciate that he did not let that reaction prevent him from coming on the show and having conversation. And I believe getting his word in. By the way, yeah, please do subscribe now. Please do join us on Facebook. Anon Giridardis, I guess. Anon Giridardis. He compares, and I think I may have mentioned this article without going into detail. Was it yesterday or the day before? He talks about how the Democratic leadership is way too predictable. And I think he's got a point. This is in the ink. This is his Substack. Is that what we call it? And he talks about how Yannick Zinner, I know I talked about this a little bit, but I really want to go into more detail. Yannick Zinner, the Italian champion, who was number one after winning Wimbledon, is now number two after losing to Carlos Alcaraz at the U.S. Tennis Association Open in New York City. And what Sinner said afterwards, I think Sinner in the end is a little better player, right? His build, he's just more of a tennis. He looks like a tennis player. So maybe that means nothing, but he does. He said I was too predictable. I just stood there on the baseline and I didn't come up to the net enough and I didn't hit enough drop shots and I didn't, do this or that. I don't know. What do I know from tennis? But that's what he said. And so Giridardis Anand, who's, by the way, an MSNBC contributor, at least he was, made the point that this is the same thing the Democrats do. They're too predictable. They're too conservative when it comes to campaigns. They're not willing to go off, on a limb, go out on a limb and talk about issues that maybe they haven't talked about. They're not willing to confront Israel. They're not willing to talk about universal health care or publicly owned groceries. And that's because they're, according to Giridardis, Anand, according to Anand, they're too predictable. And let me, again, he just keeps using that phrase over and over and over. They're too predictable. But the problem is, it's not that they're too predictable. It's that they're corrupt. They would do what it takes to win if they weren't paid not to win. And I just don't know why this is so hard for so many people to understand. I think it's just they don't want to. You don't want to. You want to believe so badly. We all do, that we have allies, that we have friends, that we have people on our side. That people with power, people who are leaders, they believe that they'll fight for us. We want to believe that so badly. So if we are reading Anand, or maybe even Anand believe this now, of course he's paid to say crap like this, that it's predictability, it's not corruption. He's paid to say that because he works for MSNBC, which is a tool of the billionaire class, a tool of the elites. Maybe he believes this, I don't know. But he's paid not to tell you they're corrupt. And of course they are. But instead, it's just that they're predictable. If only they were just a little smarter. If only they understood. If only the czar knew how tough life was for us, he would do something about it and make our life better. No, the czar doesn't give a fat rat's butt about your life. And even if he did, he's got all these advisors and hangers-on and consultants and police chiefs and everyone else telling him, no, we can't afford to make things better for the serfs. No, we can't afford to redistribute land. No, we can't do any of that. When in Zohran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York, Democrats finally have a candidate running who excites people. They do what addicts, this is Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer do. They do what they're wanted to do. They freak out and refuse to support him. There is something to that. There actually is a little bit of something to that. If you've always been able to win with sort of this corporate-friendly, billionaire-friendly message, you're going to be very loath to change it. So I think there's something to that. I won't say it's completely absurd. If a leader causes people to feel like something, the leader must be stopped. Right? Well, yeah, because they don't, and that's the corruption aspect. The Democratic Party elites, including their donor class, don't want a charismatic leader. They don't, because that charisma, that appeal, if you, and there are problems with charismatic leaders. I'm not saying we should necessarily want them. I believe policy should be the only thing that matters. Or 99%. Yes, character matters. Yes, of course, honesty matters. But in the end, what matters to people is the policies that their leaders promulgate, promote, push for. And so I don't think charisma should be such an important factor. But it is. I mean, we elected Barack Obama in large part because of his charisma. Same with Bill Clinton. Not only, but partly. I would argue that their policies were actually, at least the ones they enunciated. For example, Clinton was not a pro-NAFTA guy when he first ran for office, for example. He ran somewhat as a populist, as did Obama. He ran to the left of Hillary, for example, in 2008. So policy mattered to voters, for sure. Absolutely. But also did charisma, but so did charisma. It's a problem, because if you vote for someone based on charisma, you'll let them do things, presumably. And we saw this over and over. Well, Obama did it, so it must be okay. I love Obama. If Obama tells me not to vote for Bernie, I'm not going to vote for Bernie. That's a problem. But the flip side of that is, if a politician like a Zoran can say to himself, you know what, the voters really like me. They trust me. They believe in me. So if I call for a rent freeze, despite all the negative information they're going to hear about, a rent freeze on CNBC and on CNN and on Fox and in the pages of the New York Times, despite all of that, because the voters believe in me, they may continue to support me. So the cult of personality, to the extent there is one, can work for the public when that politician, that leader, has their best interests at heart. And they follow that leader, even though their detractors are very loud and, make at least what appear to be good arguments, sound arguments. And I think there are sound arguments against rent control. I don't love rent freezes. I think it's better to let the market generate demand, generate supply. But that's very, very difficult in a city like New York, where there's very limited space, right? It's an island. Manhattan's an island, and the other boroughs are very constricted, very densely populated. It's hard to build more housing. You can do it, but it's tough. There's tremendous desire to live in the city to the extent that you don't have rent control. The city will become more and more, not just for millionaires, but for decamillionaires and even centimillionaires. At this point, places in Manhattan now, you got to have $10 million just to be able to live there. I'm dead serious about that. You try to get a nice apartment with a view, because I think we should have nice things, right? I think people should have comfort, not extreme comfort, but room, space. You want a relatively spacious apartment on the Upper East Side in Greenwich Village, in an area where there's vibrancy, there's a community. You are going to be paying well over $8,000 a month. Okay, think about that. So let's say you pay $8,000 a month for a real, a legitimate 3-bedroom apartment with 2 full baths, maybe 2.5 baths. Doesn't sound that big, does it? Right? 4-bedroom, 3 baths. You have 3 kids. You have a 4-bedroom apartment. Doesn't sound that big, right? That could be easily north of $8,000 a month, over $100,000 a year, and that's before. That comes out of your, that's after taxes, I should say. It's not before, it's after. You make $300,000 annually in New York, $400,000 annually. Your take home is going to be a little north of $200,000, $250,000, something like that. Almost half of that, 40% of that is going to rent. That's how expensive New York City is now. That's how expensive the market has left New York City. I don't love rent control for a lot of reasons, but until you can devise a system to massively redistribute wealth and income so that it isn't in the interest of landlords just to target the billionaires, so that it isn't in the interest of developers to only build luxury apartments. Until you can create a much more equitable distribution of income and wealth, the only way New York City can be affordable for anyone but the affluent is with rent control. So, despite the arguments against it, if you believe in Zoran, you're going to say, yeah, I hear all that they're telling me on CNN, but you know what? I love Zoran. I'm going to support him. I'm going to back him. That's scary to the billionaire class. They can't control you with their messaging, with their media. That scares them. So that's a big reason they don't like Zoran. Because he excites people for that very reason. Now, to give Anand a little bit of credit, he does pay lip service to the corruption that the Democratic Party basically does what it does because of money. The culture of the Democratic Party, the invisible infrastructure was rewarded, incentivized, and trained for and shamed, right? What's rewarded? Who gets money? Favors the safe and rewarded not just in office, but after they leave office. Comfortable lobbying jobs, partnerships in big law firms. It's pretty nice. It's pretty sweet when you get it. You didn't have to work 70-hour weeks for 8 years to get to that corner office. Well, you don't get your corner office when you first made partner. Pretty sweet, you got that corner office without having to spend 7 or 8 years. Now it's 8 years, I think, to be partner, working 70-hour weeks, 50 weeks a year for 8 years, just to make partner and have non-equity partner have a center office, not a corner office, right? You're in the center of the building. On the side, well, you've got a window, but it's a small window. It's not a big office. Then you spend another 10 years building up your client list, smoothing people down, sucking up to the billionaires until you have enough of a client list and only a tiny number. Then you got that corner office. But hey, you were a congressman. You were a senator. You were a U.S. senator. You've got all these connections. Oh, we'll make you a partner right away. Pretty nice gig, huh? Pretty good. And all you have to do is not talk about rent control. All you have to do is not talk about public groceries. All you have to do is not talk about peace. There's a shock. And here Anand even points out the culture of no surprises, a means held to apprise important execs of what will happen in the future. So here's where he's saying corruption without saying it. This has all bled into political life, just as corporate money has taken over political parties. So he gets it. He just doesn't quite say it. He says it without saying it. And then I had a little comment here. Let's see. I kind of don't like the way I did that, but we'll show the whole thing to you. Might as well. Basically what I just said. I thought it was interesting. I always love those kind of comparisons, right? We're comparing tennis, comparing athletes with politicians. Why not? It does add a little interest. And I noted it, well written and astute analysis, but it only goes so far. there's a critically important difference between the way that sinner, that sinner. There's a critically important difference between the way that sinner, it should just be that sinner, and Democrat leaders are compensated. Sinner gets the biggest rewards for winning tournaments, especially majors, right? Like so the US Open, Wimbledon. Democratic leaders get paid to lose much of the time, right? I mean, you gotta believe Hakeem Jeffries right now is hearing the message loud and clear from Wall Street, from Israel. You can't back Zoran. I don't care if he's likely to win. We want to stop him any which way we can. Same with Schumer. So they're actually getting paid to lose or to win, but only winning with certain candidates who will support the exact same people that Republicans do. So even our media, when it kind of gives you a somewhat honest appraisal, doesn't give you the full money, doesn't give you the whole story. Herodotus pays lip service to the corruption in the Democratic Party, but he's much more interested in letting you believe that they're just sort of calcified. They're just kind of stultified. They're lethargic. They're phlegmatic. They're not corrupt. They're not beyond reach. Because if they're corrupt, then that kind of tells you have to go in a different direction, right? If you say, if Herodotus said, if Anand said, well, the problem with this party is that they're owned by the billionaires, the same people who own the Republicans. If Herodotus said that, then he'd kind of have to say, we got to go in a different direction. Maybe those people are talking about Jill Stein are right. And he'll never say that because then he'd lose his gig. He wouldn't be able to go on. It's a pretty sweet gig, just like we're talking about those Congress members and senators who get to, become partners without really paying their dues. Well, it's kind of the same thing with Herodotus. As long as you just sort of say what your bosses want you to say, they're going to keep you around. And it's a hell of a lot better than trying to make it outside the comfortable cocoon of the corporate media. All right, TNR, the New Republic, even more, perhaps, what's the word I'm looking for? Centrist, corporatist than Herodotus is. So TNR politics, and look at that handsome man there. They've got Zoran walking down. I think that's 6th Avenue. I could be wrong. Not sure. Well, there's a stripe down the middle, so it must be a two-way street. I'm not guessing. I don't know which one that would be then. Maybe it's like 57th Street. I don't really. It doesn't really matter. But there he is. So this is another pro-Mamdani piece. And I thought it was very interesting because they make almost the exact same, they give almost the exact same message that AOC gave. Remember, she was really salty at Hakeem Jeffries, and at least as salty as she gets, and Chuck Schumer for declining to endorse Mamdani, saying, well, I endorsed Joe Biden and I endorsed Kamala, of course. So why can't they just endorse Mamdani? And we've already been through it. It's because they're corrupt. Because the people who put them in office, who are backing them, who are pulling their strings, who are minding them, don't want Mamdani to be mayor. So that's why. The Democrats who refuse to back Mamdani are sending a scary message. They're not just undercutting a rising star. They're throwing the city to Trump's wolves. Well, I think there's some truth to that, although I don't know. Even a Mamdani can only do so much to stop Trump. But yeah, it's bad. But is that really the scary message? I think the scary message is we do what our billionaire backers tell us. The laws that we are willing to consider, that we're willing to push, are laws that the billionaires are comfortable with. The efforts that we're going to employ to stop Trump are only those that our billionaire backers are comfortable with. So that's why. So that's the scary message. It's not we're going to give you to Trump's wolves exactly. I mean, their wolves, his wolves, our wolves, they're the same thing. And here's what the New Republic claims is causing the failure. This is what's driving Jeffries and Schumer's refusal to endorse Mamdani. It's clear that Mamdani's criticism of Israel is driving much of the tepid response from national Democrats. I think that's true, right? I mean, AIPAC terrifies them. But it's not the only thing going on. They're also allegedly afraid to be painted the party of the young Muslim, which I guess also drives the Israel issue, democratic socialist Mamdani. So they're saying, oh, this would be terrible for our party if we're, tied to Mamdani. They may actually, I don't know if they believe that. It couldn't be clearer that the American public, especially Democrats, but independents as well, greatly prefer Mamdani. They prefer his policies. They prefer his populism to the stale elitism of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. It couldn't be clearer. But allegedly, according to TNR, well, they're just they don't get it. They don't realize that. They're afraid of being painted as socialist or communist. And if only we can just convince them that that won't hurt them, that they're better off accepting that that's what Republicans will always say to them. As long as they, we can convince them, they'll do the right thing. That's what the New Republic is saying. They're saying this is foolhardy. Republicans will accuse Democrats of being communists, globalists, and closet jihadists, whether or not they endorse Mamdani. Of course, that's true. And he points out that they did that to Harris. They did that to Obama. So yeah, I mean, of course. So that is correct. And they're saying it's also foolhardy because Americans like Mamdani. They prefer Mamdani. So given this look, Jeffries, I don't think Jeffries and Schumer are the smartest bulbs in the drawer by any means. They're not the sharpest knives either. But they're not totally stupid. They're political animals. They kind of know instinctively what they should or shouldn't do. They know instinctively that the public is against them. But they also know that Wall Street, the big bankrolls, are with them as long as they don't endorse Mamdani, as long as they don't support Mamdani, as long as they don't follow his policy prescriptions. And that's why they don't do it. And the reason people like AOC don't call them out for that is because she's hoping she can rise within the party. She's willing to be part of that corrupt system. Only by a complete break, really. Only when we challenge the Democrat Party from the left, from outside the party, do we have a chance to make things better. All right, thank you so much. Again, I always say it, and I mean it 100%. Thank you so much for being part of Halitics. I will talk a little bit more about my reaction to the Kirk shooting. It's a little bit more, it's complicated. It really is. I thought it was a very good discussion we had. That is, we meaning Ed Kelly and I, about this. And I'm looking forward to having more, not just with him, but with others with whom I may have profound, sometimes, disagreements on issues. Thanks again. I will be back tomorrow for the free-for-all.